In the penultimate episode of Before its first season, Eli is finally in a position where he's unable to duck or dodge the topic of Lynn, and it seems like we're finally going to get an answer to one of the season's most pertinent questions. So, to get into the recap, after the events of the last episode where Cleo found herself having to call the ambulance because something happened with Eli, the whole him confessing to Lynn's murder is addressed. And to make a long story short, it seems after he got back from getting some Chinese food, he found Lynn and she was in fact alive. Barely alive, but still alive enough where Eli could sense that she was just hanging on. Hence the vision that we saw fairly early in the season where he was choking her, and that's because in his mind that was the most humane thing to do. And unfortunately, it's not really addressed what's the legalities of him doing that, for it becomes more about, one, the fact that Eli is stuck in a psych ward, and two, how Barbara feels about the whole situation. Now, in terms of the psych ward portion, Jane is unfortunately his doctor rather than the therapist we saw him with, and because Jane has seen some of Eli's psychosis, she decides, let's run some tests, let's put a hold on him, and Barbara agrees. Now, let it be known, Barbara's not necessarily holding anything against her dad, but there is this feeling with her that she knows something is different, something has changed, and she wants answers just as much as anybody else. Plus, when it comes to the whole him killing her mother thing, or finishing off, however you want to put it, Lynn was looking to die for at least a year before she decided to take her life, so this wasn't something necessarily new to Barbara. It's just her father's lack of communication with her mother, which led to that incident, is kind of what bugs her. But for the most part, it seems that those two, even though their relationship may remain strained, there is still some path forward between them. Unfortunately, though, in the topic of Noah, his situation, the path forward does not look good. Even though his lips are blue, he's cold, and Denise is worried about him, being that Denise signed over her rights, she can't say or do nothing. And with that, unfortunately, she has no options. And of course, Gail, she's gone, so she doesn't have an ally in that. So she goes to Eli, even though he's in a psych ward, so clearly he's not really able to do much to help her, but there was some hope that he could express a theory or something that makes sense that could help, but unfortunately, he might be in the hospital, but it's not forgotten what he did in order to initially lose his rights to even step through the door, especially as anything but a patient. But luckily, depending how you look at it, Eli may be a little off kilter right now, but at the very least, he is still about his wits, and with knowing that he could possibly help Noah by getting him home, and also the fact that he's aware how he can get out of the psych ward, he decides to slam his hand on a pen so that he's bleeding. And this comes from looking at a picture that Lynn left. And with that, he gets put into a holding area before he goes to the OR. He escapes his bed, finds Noah, who happens to be in transportation going to Ithaca, and steals that vehicle, and now is off to take Noah home, wherever that's supposed to be. So the review for this is very short and sweet, and that's just that, to me, it was probably one of the few episodes that was engaging throughout, and I think part of the reason for that is because it stripped Eli of all his privilege and also his perceived power that he had. For I think with him being turned into an underdog, it actually made it so that he had to really work in order to do something. He had some sort of accountability over him. Like whether it's Cleo, Barbara, or Jane, there was somebody that was taking note of his actions and making it so that he couldn't just throw up, "I'm a doctor, I've been doing this for decades," as a defense against any type of criticism. Now with him considered, psychologically unwell, now he has to really fight and do more in order to get anything done. On top of that, even though admittedly the confession about what he did to Lynn and also what happened the day or afternoon that Lynn died, it wasn't necessarily satisfactory. It was still an answer and it was still something. So while I wouldn't say that when it comes to this episode, this necessarily delivered in a high level, at the same time, even if it wasn't jaw dropping, and maybe it was a little bit frustrating, at least she got something acceptable. And hopefully, with the next episode being likely the series finale, but it could also be the season finale, hopefully all's in with this show in an acceptable manner and not something that makes you feel like you got a decent answer for what's going on with Lynn, but then the ultimate answer of what's going on with Eli was a waste of time.